up, everybody? Nate here. And on September 1st, the world may witness one of the largest strikes in human history. Now, just in 2023, we have seen our fair share of strikes, as the Writers and Actors Guild have been on strike for months now. UPS almost went through one of the largest strikes in its company's history, and UAW auto workers may have one of the largest strikes in the auto industry in mid-September. So there is a lot of strikes going on right now, but none of these strikes come even close to the strike that could happen on September 1st. Now, first and foremost, what is this strike all about? Now, this strike is a lot more of a general strike compared to what UPS was proposing and what the Writers and Actors Guild is currently going through. When I say a general strike, this is a strike against certain things in our economy, like a lot of it has to do with working conditions and rent prices going way up, along with grocery prices. Pretty much there is a lot of individuals in our economy right now that feel that prices and just working conditions and our economy isn't really working for them, and what is happening isn't really fair. So we have started to see, especially on social media platforms like TikTok, is a lot of individuals saying that there's going to be this general strike. Basically, TikTokers and a lot of social media influencers are calling on people to protest high prices and poor working conditions by calling out of work on September 1st and not going back until working conditions improve, and also not buying anything else in our economy until grocery prices and general merchandise prices start to come down and are a lot more affordable once again. Not only that, but housing affordability has gone crazy over the last couple of years, so the strike is also calling for millions of Americans who are under rent leases right now to completely stop paying their rent. Effectively, the whole goal here is to bring down prices and to make working conditions a whole lot better for a lot of Americans. The strikers believe that by not paying their rent and by not going out and buying anything, that could essentially put a lot of pressure on corporations and landlords to lower their prices, because if they're not getting any money in general, then they're going to start hurting, and they'd rather get some money than none, so they're going to lower their prices and kind of work with individual tenants and individual buyers at the grocery store. And we'll talk about if that actually works in a minute here, but I want to talk about the strike in general. Now, the strike, like I said, is a very different one compared to what we saw from UPS and the Writers and Actors Guild. Just right off the bat, those strikes actually had an establishment that were behind them, typically some sort of union. A union is kind of the middleman between a company or a corporation and the individuals who actually work the job every day. The union is there to kind of represent the workers, and they're there to sort of negotiate the terms and conditions that the workers are going to be subjected to. And this whole process can get very complicated if both sides don't really agree on those terms and conditions. 9 times out of 10, strikes like these have some sort of face. Like I said, it's some sort of union, and there are two sides that are going to directly come to a negotiating table in order to meet on particular individual terms. So say a particular union was fighting for workers on getting a lot better benefits or better pay at their particular job. So what they're going to ultimately do is they're going to work with the company to see how much that company can actually afford to give them and how close they can get on a number. So say it might be a 5% raise or something like that, and maybe both sides don't come to an agreement. So at that point, they might have to call in something like a mediator to look at both parties and their sides to actually say, well, can the corporation afford to actually give the workers the raise that they're asking for? And at the end of the day, if the sides still can't decide, then they'll go to something called arbitration. Arbitration goes in front of a judge, and the judge basically makes a legal call to say that the company and the workers have to agree on whatever the judge decides. Now, this whole entire process can take a very, very long time. We're talking months to years, and it really just depends on how far apart the sides are. But like I said, at the end of the day, it really just comes down to one side kind of coming together with the other side to negotiate on very specific terms. They're not talking about everything vaguely like working conditions. They're talking about very specific things like worker pay. This whole process can take months to years, and it's important to mention that not every single union has the ability to strike. Some unions can strike and actually prevent a corporation from making profits and getting any work done because they're going out and striking for what they believe. Other unions don't have the ability to strike, and it really just depends on the nature of the work, and it depends on what exactly is in their particular contract. For the record, that doesn't mean that workers can't do anything to protest at their job. There are steps that you can take when it comes to trying to get better pay and better benefits at your particular job, even if you don't have union representation, because there are millions of jobs out there that don't have a union behind them to actually try to work with the corporation or a company to get better pay, better benefits, whatever it may be. Now, I bring this up because it's a very important fact, and it's a very big differentiating factor between this September 1st general strike and the strikes that we have seen and could potentially continue to see in the United States and across the world. This general strike is more vague than a lot of those other strikes. So they're saying that they want lower prices at the grocery store, and they want lower rent, and they also want better working conditions. Well, these are all things that are not super specific. Like, for instance, how low should prices go? Should rent be in the United States? Nobody really knows. And the other really kind of curious thing about this September 1st strike is the organizers of it haven't really been identified. I mean, there is an actual website out there that you can see, and there is a bunch of places where influencers have been pushing this strike online, but the actual literal organizers who could potentially be working with companies and corporations and our government to work on prices and working conditions, well, they haven't really been identified yet, which is a little bit sketchy, because who's going to have those conversations? Who's going to be the one that is representing all of these millions of people? Now, a strike of this magnitude really has never happened in United States history before. I mean, we've never had millions of people coming together all at once saying that they are not going to buy anything for the foreseeable future. People saying that they're not going to pay their rent in mass. We've never really seen that before, and there is a very simple reason why. People still need things, and it's really, really difficult to get that many people together on such a wide range of issues. I'm not saying that prices at the grocery store or rent prices are not completely out of control right now, because they definitely are. We have seen pockets in the United States where rent has gone up so much that people are doing things like cutting into their savings, and people are doing things like cutting back spending at the grocery store and everywhere else to make ends meet. People are moving in with roommates. Rent is just completely unaffordable, and that is a huge issue all throughout the United States. But you got to look at the entire picture here. Housing is also just a complete mess in the United States as well. The renters market is completely messed up because the mortgage market and the housing market in the United States is also completely messed up right now. We have a huge issue and a huge imbalance of supply and demand in the United States, and home unaffordability has gone way up. So as home unaffordability has gone up, well, that has pushed more demand into the renters market, which means with so much demand, that means that pretty much everybody is looking to rent a home or an apartment right now instead of buying a home, because buying a home is nearly impossible with record high interest rates and record high prices. And the big issue with that and this September 1st strike in general is that there is a huge disparity between the haves and the have-nots right now. And what I mean by that is there's a big disparity between people who have money and people who don't have money. You're probably thinking right now, well, Nate, if the housing market is so messed up and houses are completely unaffordable, then why hasn't the market crashed yet? And if prices at the grocery store are out of control and people can't afford to buy anything at the grocery store, then why haven't prices calmed down? I mean, wouldn't we have had a natural strike anyway, because people wouldn't be able to go to the grocery store and pay for things, and people wouldn't be able to pay their rent? Well, that is the issue right now. When we have recessions like we might be going through right now, and when we have big economic events like the pandemic where we saw unemployment go up to 15%, we also have a bigger disparity between the haves and the have-nots. And what I mean by that is those who are financially educated and know how the system works take advantage of the situation when we have recessions and when we have things like stock market crashes or real estate crashes. And what ultimately happens is they get a whole lot richer, which makes them able to afford a lot more and buy a lot more things. And then you have the other side, the financially uneducated simply get hurt a whole lot more during recessions, and they typically have to rely more on things like debt just to make ends meet. So what I'm saying here is that there is a large population of people in the United States and in certain areas that even though there are a large group of people that are suffering, there's also a large group of people who are benefiting from a lot of these economic economic conditions, and they are still able to buy things. And if they are still able to buy enough things, well, then that means that the entire market can't really crash. That is what's going on in the housing market in particular right now. Yes, home unaffordability is at an all-time high right now. People are not able to afford houses in mass, but the market isn't crashing because there's just a little bit more demand than there is supply, because there are some people out there who still have gotten bigger raises or have bigger investment portfolios and have bigger savings based on the conditions that happened during the pandemic, with all of that stimulus and the great resignation with people moving around and getting bigger and better jobs. A lot of people have now gotten raises and are able to afford more things. So that means they're able to go out and get a bigger house, and they're still stimulating the market. On one hand, you can look at this as a positive, because that means our economy isn't going to crash, because even though the Federal Reserve has been doing things like raising their interest rates, and the federal government has been pulling back a lot of their economic stimulus and a lot of their programs that were introduced during the pandemic, well, that means there's still a lot of economic opportunity out there, because there's still a lot of money floating around, and it's not like it's a dead economy. But you can also look at this from the negative to say that you're not one of the lucky ones who have had the financial education or have had any money to invest and to make an opportunity happen for yourself. Well, then now you are suffering more than ever. And unfortunately, this is not the first time that we have seen this in the United States. We have seen a similar phenomenon happen after the Great Recession of 2008. This happened during the stock market crash of 2001. This happened during the Great Inflation Crisis of the late 70s and early 80s. Every single time more money is printed into the system and we have really high inflation and really high unemployment, well, there are people who suffer badly because of that. And then there are also people who make millions, if not billions of dollars. Just during the pandemic, billionaires made trillions of dollars combined because they were the holders of assets, things that were going to continue to go up in value despite what was going to happen in our economy. And unfortunately, this phenomenon is not going away anytime soon. In fact, we have seen more frequent and worse recessions in the United States over the last 20 and 30 years or so. It seems like recessions and major economic events are happening more frequently now, and they're getting a lot worse. That's just typically what happens when an economy gets a whole lot older. And it's what happens when we have fiscal policy that is sort of running out from the government standpoint, and also a lot more dollars in circulation. These things like inflation just continue to make our economy a whole lot harder to live in. Now, as for the strike itself, look, I am not going to give you advice on what you should do at your workplace. I'm not going to give you advice on whether you should pay your rent or whether you should not pay your rent or go out and buy groceries. I would never tell you what to do, especially when it comes to your money, and never listen to random people online, because they have other interests and they do not have your interest in mind here. So again, I'm not telling you what to do, and I'm not giving you any advice here. There are always options when you strike against a corporation or a particular company, but you have to be careful here, and you have to make sure that there is some sort of unified message, and you have to make sure that there is representation across the board and that you're fighting for very specific issues. Otherwise, this entire strike is just going to create a lot more economic headache for millions of people who decide that they're not going to pay their rent, and then eventually they don't have that unified support. So now they're just going to have to pay a late fee on their rent if they decide to give up after just a few days. So like I said, I'm not saying that you shouldn't. I'm just saying that it has to be a little bit more organized than just we're going to strike generally across our entire economy. You have to have very specific things that you're fighting for, or else the entire thing just falls apart, and it's going to hurt strikes in the future, and it's just going to hurt your individual bank account. And in this economy, as you can see, you cannot afford to do that right now. So be careful what you do out there, and be careful what you're striking about. Just make sure you are going about it methodically. What I do encourage people to do is strike with their bank accounts every single day. If a particular company or organization is making products that you don't like, or is pricing those products at a range that you simply can't afford, well, don't buy that product anymore. And I know this is easier said than done for a lot of different things, but if you don't like something, strike with your wallet. Let that company know that you are not going to buy its products anymore because you don't support them and their message, or you don't support them because their prices are way too high. And if enough people do that, then eventually these companies and these landlords will have to lower their prices, simply because they run off profit and revenue. And if they're not getting profit and and revenue, well, then they're going to have to shrink everything down. And it just makes sense from a business standpoint. Like I said, business is all about making money. And if businesses aren't making money because people don't want to buy their things anymore, well, then they're going to have to make changes, and they might want to make changes. The big issue right now is people are still buying their stuff, so they don't really have any reason to change their prices or their messages. Like I said, you are one person and you have the power in your own life to do those individual strikes and to not buy certain things if you don't want to. And I think that that sends a powerful message to companies and corporations. And even that change should not be underestimated. It's something that I think everybody can start doing right now on a really small level, and it's going to ultimately help your bank account. In the future, we're most likely going to continue to see bigger and bigger strikes as we have this growing disparity between the haves and the have-nots. And one of the ways that you can sort of subvert all of that is with financial education. Knowing how to manage your money, knowing how to save, spend, and invest is going to help you sort of beat all of the issues today and prevent issues in your finances in the future. That's what we're talking about, along with all of the breaking business and financial news on this channel 7 days a week. So if you want to subscribe, be sure to hit that sub button below. And if you want more from me, I've got another video ready for you right there. So be sure to check that out before you go. That's it for me, everybody. Be kind out there, and I'll see you all in the next one.